Hello and welcome to this demonstration. My name is Wiley Stevens. I'm from SeQent. Today we're going to be demonstrating SeQent's FirstPage Alarm Manager Gateway for OPC, our ability to connect to an OPC server and ultimately deliver a text message to someone. In addition, we're going to be looking at our FirstPage Alarm Manager Gateway for System Platform. Our ability to connect to a system platform environment and ultimately remit a text message or maybe make a phone call out. And then we're going to be looking at our core software, FirstPage Alarm Manager, and FirstPage Server. So let's jump in it and get started. I'm going to start with our gateway for OPC here. You can see that on the right-hand side. Number one, this is the application that connects to an OPC server. It acts as a client in order to subscribe to any of that data. You can see I've got some configuration here up on the screen. So the first thing that one would do in this application is build what's called a device. That's our ability to connect to the OPC server. We do support local and remote, and you can see that there's a drop down here that allows you to select any of the local OPC servers when we're installed on the same machine, or any of the remote OPC servers when we're not. We do prefer a local configuration to avoid any of those potential DCOM issues. However, as I mentioned, we do support remote where that is absolutely required. Once we've built that connection to an OPC server, then we can subscribe to tags, or as we call them, items in the software. So we do that by clicking on a new item here, and we can click on the Browse button, and we can display any of the tags that exist in that OPC server that we've selected. So you can see if I dig through the SeQent configuration here, we can take a look at the tags. And the only reason I've got Kepware open at all, Kepware being one of the OPC server examples that we can connect to, but as I said, we are an OPC client, and so we could connect to any OPC server. But you'll notice that we're showing almost the exact same instances. We're trying to lower the burden entry into our application by displaying the information in as similar to the original form factor as possible, so that anyone new coming into our software hopefully becomes just a little bit more familiar with that. So once a user has selected one of the tags that they're interested in, maybe it represents a tank temperature or whether a motor is running or not, something that you want to monitor in your manufacturing environment, we can click on OK and bring that value back into our world, and we just give it a plain text name, something that describes what that tag actually means. So once we've saved that configuration, the next role of this application would be to create an event. So let's take a look at our tank temperature manual high here, for example. I'm just simply going to say no, I don't want to save any of those changes related to what I was demonstrating earlier. So in this configuration, a couple things to point out. Number one, we have a trigger item. So that trigger item is any of the subscribed items that you've already performed. Then we have a trigger test. So is that equal to 1 or 0? Maybe it's a motor that's running or not. In my case, maybe that temperature, when it is greater than 79 degrees, that's what constitutes an alarm, and that's ultimately what you want to use to page out to somebody. In addition to that trigger configuration, we also have an action tab here, which is highly important. This allows us to take additional information from the OPC server and push it out to an end user when that alarm is triggered. So maybe it is a string related to a description of what that issue is. Maybe it is a SKU related to the specific piece of manufactured product that is occurring at that time. One last comment about our gateway for OPC is that we also support import-export. So mass configuration is possible where you have a lot of items or events that you want to create in a very quick manner. Moving right along, we'll compare that to FirstPage Alarm Manager Gateway for System Platform. This is SeQent's application that connects to a system platform environment, and this is what we call one of our routing style gateways. We call it that because we don't create any of the configuration in terms of what constitutes an alarm in this app. That's all done by integrators, by end users in their system platform environment. This just simply routes those alarms that a customer is looking to send out as a notification to someone's smartphone, radio, or as an audible call out. So the key takeaway here is that we have a system platform tab where we use a DSN connection to build a list of all of the alarms, and you'll see how we use that momentarily. And then we also populate the galaxy name. This is what allows us access to that specific galaxy to notify us when an alarm turns on or it turns off. SeQent also has a user guide, which a customer can use to help implement the Gateway for System platform. You can see here that we've got a small diagram which shows the multiple different gateways that SeQent supports in addition to System Platform, and how one would plug those into FirstPage Alarm Manager and then ultimately into FirstPage Server. Those are the apps that I'm going to show you here now. So I've got my applications installed on a couple different machines. This highlights the platform functionality. We have a very modular platform where you can then install those applications and really architect the system how you need it to. An example of that would be maybe you want internet access to be able to send out an email message or a message to a carrier, but you don't want to provide internet access where your system platform environment is. And so SeQent's solution to that is our platform. You could install the gateway with the system platform environment, install FirstPage on a completely separate machine, and then you've created that barrier as a quick example. So let's get started here with FirstPage. FirstPage, once again, is our message engine, and this is where we configure all of the outbound destinations. I won't necessarily be going through all of the configuration here, but I will give you some brief highlights. For example, our ability to send a message to a Motorola radio or make a call out to a radio, so transmitting via text-to-speech audio to a radio, is one of the core functionalities that SeQent customers are provided. And so ultimately, one would create a device first. That device is really choosing the path out of FirstPage. Is it audio? Is it going over an Ethernet connection, intranet or internet? And ultimately, one would create a provider. In this case, this is a provider under a TCP device. And the provider is really just choosing the protocol. Ultimately, the most common protocols in North America would be SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SNPP, Simple Network Paging Protocol, but you can see that we offer multiple protocols that are used globally. Looking at this specific provider that's configured, it is SNPP. We are using that to connect to our link application, which ultimately connects to the radio system in order to remit that text message. And then ultimately, we've got the destinations configured underneath. So if we take a look at the Wiley Stevens radio here, we can see a number of fields that are populated, namely the name. So you give it a naming convention in terms of what you want that destination name to be. And then you've got a network ID. The network ID is our generic term for what is that endpoint that we want to send the message to. So in this case, it's the radio ID. If I go ahead and expand my configuration where I have an email, it is an email address. Or if I go ahead and expand my configuration where we're using the SNPP protocol to communicate with carrier, that network ID is a phone number. So just to show you how quick and easy it is to create a new destination, let's go ahead and do that now. We can go ahead and create the Susan email. We'll go ahead and tab down to the type field, but I will expose all those values. So this is really just an administrative field, one that allows us to select what the icon that you see is in the tree view. And then maybe Susan's email is susan@email.com. And we go ahead and populate that into the network ID, and then I can do Control S to save. Now we've created a new destination. We could even go ahead and send it a test message as soon as we've done so. And similar to the other applications I've shown you so far, we do support import-export. So if you want to create lots of different destinations in a very quick amount of time, we can absolutely provide that to end users. One last comment about FirstPage is that we also support distribution lists as well. So you can group like destinations either based on a person or a role, however you ultimately want to do that. So moving right along, the application that really marries up those alarms that exist in the gateway and the destinations that we've created is FirstPage Alarm Manager. This is the application where each one of these agents is a data source somewhere in my environment. And today we're going to be focusing in on OPC and system platform as we've looked at already. But I'm going to first show you what an escalation scheme is. This is our templatization of who gets messages and when. I've got an OPC escalation scheme here that has multiple different levels, meaning multiple ways of escalating that. And then I've got a system platform escalation scheme that really just has one level. And ultimately, we're going to send a couple of messages with a gap of 300 seconds or 5 minutes in between. And so a customer gets to dictate exactly how many escalation schemes they want to create, how many levels within that. It's entirely customizable. If we take a look at our OPC escalation scheme, we can see that I've got level 1, level 2 following level 1, level 3 following level 2, and so forth, with just one message and a delay between of 20 seconds. This allows us to do a quick demo at the end of the call today, but we can obviously extend that and make it more practical in the manufacturing environment. And then there's a destination tab, which allows us to either see all the destinations that exist in FirstPage or just those destinations that are actually configured. And once again, the idea is to send messages to those that are responsible for correcting the issue. So maybe a group of electricians first, and then we escalate to the team leader, maybe escalate to a supervisor, and should you want to, right up to the plant manager when an issue occurs. Moving right along, we've got message templates. So in addition to templatizing the escalation scheme, who gets the messages, we also templatize the actual message itself. And so if we take a look at our tank temperature message, we can see it's comprised of both variables and literal text. This affords you the ability to create exactly what you want to go to the end user as a text message or as a text-to-speech message. And so our variable interface is opened up via the shift square bracket or the open curly brace, if you're familiar with that character. And I won't go through all of these variables, but I will focus in on user text. It relates to everything that's in that data source. And so user text would be different between OPC and system platform and any of the other data sources that we support. I go ahead and show you what the message templates look like from a system platform environment. We can go ahead and I'm just going to say no, I don't want to save any of those changes. See that in this case, I'm just using the description from system platform. In my specific environment, my descriptions are what I want to send to those end users and descriptive enough to tell them what that issue is. And so, you know, in some configurations, you can get away with as minimal as this in order to create those messages. The whole point of templatizing escalation schemes and message templates are to reduce configuration for end users. Then it comes to the alarm itself. And so if we go ahead and look at a system platform alarm, we'll create a new one here. So I'll populate some of those fields that we've talked about earlier, the escalation scheme. So in this case, maybe I'm going to choose the system platform escalation. We have a message tab here where I can go ahead and select the alarm on message template. That's the description variable that we talked about earlier. And if I go back to the details tab, we have a browse button here, which allows us to show all of the alarms that exist within that galaxy. So that routing gateway, the gateway for system platform, one of its jobs is to provide the full list of alarms to FirstPage Alarm Manager in order to provide this user interface for customers to go and point and select the alarm that they're interested in. So let's say the group alarm 700 is the one that I want to configure right now. I can go ahead and click OK, and you'll see that it populates that information into the fields appropriately. And this is what I like to call a one-to-one relationship. So this is specifically looking when group alarm 700 occurs and then notifying the appropriate people. And that may be perfectly appropriate for your configuration. However, our configuration does not necessarily stop there. If we go ahead and click on the Browse button, maybe we're interested in every alarm under line 01A. I can go ahead and select that level and pay close attention to the pattern match as well as the alarm and group itself. And you'll notice that we insert the correct variables or wildcards and we switch to simple pattern matching in order to create a one-to-many relationship. So this one alarm that you save in FirstPage Alarm Manager can match tens or hundreds of alarms or even thousands of alarms in system platform. Once again, with the only goal to reduce configuration for the end user. The lowest common denominator here being the escalation scheme and message template, assuming that these are all going to the same group of people. Now, depending on how wide a net you cast with regards to using wildcards, we do support wildcard exceptions where you could remove individual alarms or groups of alarms. Maybe I'm interested in everything under line 01A, but I don't want alarm 100. It's not useful or it's not something critical that I want to notify my end users of. You could bring that into our world and add that as a wildcard exception. So let's go ahead and jump into a demonstration. I'm going to bring you back to this machine here where we've got a couple different ways of demonstrating this for you. First of all, I've got this web page that we've built on top of an OPC environment. I also have a smartphone here where I can go ahead and I can show you some of those text messages that are being received. So on this Android smartphone that I'm using some screen sharing software to show on the screen, it's a physical device on my desk. we have our Wi-Fi messenger application. That application is intended to make any smartphone device, any mobile device, essentially into a Wi-Fi based pager. So it does not necessarily require a SIM card. The intent is to deliver that text message over the local Wi-Fi to that device and not incur any air charges. And should a customer desire the functionality, it can fall back to any other FirstPage destination, that being a carrier destination. Maybe it is going as a text message, maybe it's going to a radio, maybe it's making a phone call if you're not available within the Wi-Fi when that message occurs. So looking at our demonstration on the left-hand side, once again, this is a web page that we designed to be able to kind of help tell the manufacturing story. So it's not a real HMI. However, it does allow us to control those values within an OPC server. So, a tank being a very pervasive piece of equipment in manufacturing, let's say, as you saw before when we looked at our configuration, when that alarm goes, or when that value goes over 79 degrees, that's what constitutes an alarm in this environment. So let's go ahead and do that now. We'll make that 82 degrees. And when that occurs, we can see that first message coming into Wi-Fi Messenger. I can go ahead and I can read that message. But the key takeaway here is that it's showing that 82 degrees, that real-time variable that represents the temperature. And that real-time variable will be displayed in each message as you see it in the OPC server, or in this case using the web page here to control that. So my next escalation is going to my radio, and I can go ahead and show you what that text message looks like on the radio using the smartphone camera here. There you go. So hopefully you can see that 89 degrees coming through there.
Supervisor escalation message. Tank temperature alarm. 89 degrees Fahrenheit. Active 40 seconds.
So that's the text-to-speech message that's coming out of the radio. That's my third level of escalation. Once again, escalation is entirely user configurable, so you can create as many different levels of escalation as you require. The last level of escalation is my phone call here. So hopefully you could hear that message coming through the telephone there. So again, just demonstrating the ability to go through that escalation when an alarm occurs based on an OPC trigger. So let's go ahead and set that back to a normal condition. And optionally, we can do what's called a terminate message.
Tank temperature alarm terminated after 101 seconds.
And I won't pick that one up there. But again, once again, optionally, we can set up what's called a terminate message. We can notify all previous parties that an alarm is terminated when that occurs. We say it's optional because if we're notifying just one person, very often that one person is able to know when that alarm has been turned off, they've dealt with it. And so a terminate message may be redundant, maybe not necessary in that case. When we're notifying larger groups of people, that's where a terminate message can be handy to let them all know that that issue has been resolved. They no longer need to reach out to coworkers or deal with that in any further way. So that's just an example from an OPC perspective. Let's move on to our example from a system platform perspective. So I've got a system platform Galaxy, and this is a manage in touch environment here. This allows me to control an alarm. And in my smartphone application here, which did receive that terminate message, we'll go ahead and receive that alarm from system platform. So let's go ahead and turn that on. We can see in just a second there it is received. So asset 1, machine down. So if you recall, we used just the description here. You can see the description located in the system platform alarm viewer, and that's what shows up on the end device, whether again it be a smartphone or a radio or whatever we're sending that text message to. In this case, because the system supports it, I can actually go ahead and acknowledge that message directly from my device, and that acknowledged message can go right back to the data source. We'll see in a second or so here that this alarm shows up as acknowledged. And we also see in the description it shows the device which acknowledged it as well. And so we do, again, optionally have a message that we can deliver to the end user. You can see it here on the screen now that the asset one was acknowledged after 34 seconds. Now, what's somewhat interesting about that is not necessarily our software just responding to the message from the end device. It is actually our software going what we call around the horn, delivering it to the system platform environment, the data source, and waiting for it to tell us that that alarm is acknowledged. So that message to the end user is really confirmation that that acknowledgement did get all the way back to the data source and then is delivered back to that end user once again as confirmation that acknowledgement occurred. Then when that alarm turns off, in this case, I don't have a terminate message set up. We go back to waiting for that alarm to turn on, and then we'll notify those parties of that issue the next time it occurs. So that's just a quick demonstration of SeQent software with regards to OPC, with regards to system platform, us picking up an alarm, sending it to multiple different types of destinations, and we can implement this with any manufacturing customer with any of those automation data sources. And we're happy to have you reach out if you're interested. Thanks very much for listening and watching our demonstration. And my name's Wiley Stevens. Have a great day.